Hello and welcome to A Tribe Called Health. The Tribe convenes weekly for a roundtable discussion on all things health, fitness, and sustainable living. We're about to get started, but first a disclaimer. The information on this broadcast should not be considered medical or legal advice. If you need medical or legal advice, seek a doctor or a lawyer. If you are a doctor or a lawyer and need health or fitness advice, get in the tribe. On today's show, we welcome the Digestive Detective, Jason Bosley-Smith. The topic, digestion and poop. It's going to be a wild ride, so fasten your seatbelts because we're about to talk shit. Hey everyone, my name is Joe Rignola of WellnessPunks.com, and with me, as always, the ever-fabulous Eric Hulse.
Hey guys.
And the ever-sexy John Randall. What's up, boys?
Word, how's it going?
Remind everyone where they can find you on the internets.
With me, you could find me erichulse.com. That's it.
I'm at sexfoodandkettlebells.com.
Cool. Eric, why don't you introduce our guest?
Definitely. All right, we have Jason Bosley-Smith, the Digestive Detective, FDN, works to seek out the underlying causes of digestive disturbances and provide nutrition, lifestyle-based solutions for optimizing digestive health. A certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, Jason works at a subclinical level to identify digestive dysfunction through the use of comprehensive assessments and functional lab testing. Using the nutritional enhancement, smart supplementation, and lifestyle modification, Jason empowers clients to digestive wellness and thereby overall health. A 12-year veteran of the health and wellness industry, Jason has worked in a variety of capacities in health coaching, personal training, and nutritional counseling. He's currently completing a graduate program in nutrition and integrative health at the Maryland University of Integrative Health and serves on the Maryland State Advisory Council on Physical Education. Jason launched DigestiveDetective.com in 2011 with the goal of providing strategies that help individuals seek out the underlying causes of their GI issues and practical solutions to solve their health challenges. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
So, hold on a second. Jason, which one of us just botched your name? Because we said it differently.
Oh, no.
I said Bosley, and Eric said Bosley.
Eric botched it. It's Bosley.
Oh, all right, cool.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Last time when he introduced me, I think in the bio he called me John as well. So he's just.
Oh no!
Oh man! Wow.
So
I'm
you guys can
not batting 1,000 at all.
You guys can
cool.
refer to me as John Bosley.
No, sorry.
Wow. So I'm glad. Yet another reason why we're glad we're redoing this, because for those of you who haven't checked our Facebook page, this is the second run through here, because the first one, the audio was pretty bad. So there you go.
You don't have to tell people that.
Well, you know, we don't want to put out crap. You know, we're not totally crap anyway. Trying to keep quality. So, Jason, tell us how you got into this line of work, and how you became the digestive detective. Why the focus on digestion, and all that good stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So as Eric mentioned, I've been in some capacity working in health and wellness over the past 12 years or so, and was working with clients for a long period of time with personal training and some nutrition and lifestyle coaching, and kind of gradually, kind of dug deeper with different aspects of health and wellness, and really started to focus more on nutrition because that's a huge barrier for a lot of clients that I work with specifically. And was just always trying to find additional tools. So one of the tools I found was functional diagnostic nutrition, which really kind of affords a much deeper and broader really spectrum of tools and resources, because you can then look at sort of these subclinical aspects that were mentioned with the functional lab kits, and really kind of look at the whole picture from a holistic perspective. Because to be honest, there was periods of time when clients were doing what seemed to be all the right things in terms of their exercise, nutrition, but it was like they were swimming upstream. They weren't getting results. I was banging my head against the wall, going, I don't understand why this isn't working. And there's so many other physiological processes that can be kind of imbalanced or off kilter, and if they are, despite your best efforts with exercise and diet, it's not going to create the change you want to see. So we started to kind of shift into doing some of that, and inevitably the sort of transition into digestion really came when I was talking with clients often, and we would start by talking about nutrition, and inevitably within 10 minutes we'd get into the conversation about, well, how do you digest things, and and poop would come up and all these sort of things, and time after time there would be client after client that would say, yeah, I've got problems there. I'm running to the bathroom, or I'm not going to the bathroom more than once or twice a week, or I've got IBS, I've got heartburn, I've got you fill in the blank and name a digestive kind of issue or condition, and they had it. So it came to kind of my realization that despite eating the healthiest food you could possibly eat, if you're not digesting and absorbing and assimilating those foods, you're really not getting those nutrients, and so it's kind of a waste. You could be literally flushing all that food down the toilet. So it became a focus for me to kind of look at what they're doing in terms of not only the nutrition but the digestion, the integrity of their digestive systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Jason, I'm curious, when you first start working with a client, right, and they come to you and they give you all of these, and they have some hardcore digestive issues, what's usually the first thing that you either add to their life or take away from their life to increase their digestion?
Wow, that's a great question, and it honestly depends, because much as with really any kind of aspect of health, it's very individualized. So it kind of depends on where they're at, what specifically they have going on. We want to kind of dig deep. My focus is always kind of getting to the root cause of what's going on. What's the mechanism by which is kind of triggering their issues? So it could be a lot of things. I mean, so if we start with some basic lifestyle-oriented things, stress is always one thing to kind of address. Stress can directly impact digestion, so that's always a huge factor to look at. How's their stress? Certainly how's their sleep, because that'll impact stress. That'll impact nervous system activation. So we'll look at those sort of aspects too. And really from a what do we take away sort of perspective, we're looking at foods that could be irritating to the gut. So we're going to look at what they do in terms of their nutrition, do some food journals, kind of get a sense of where they're at with specific nutritional aspects, and try to potentially either remove the real obvious ones, get them away from processed foods and junk foods, and eating really real foods, and then look for potentially any problematic foods through whether it's an elimination diet or elimination protocol of some kind. Take certain things out to see if it makes a change.
Awesome.
So
go
ahead, John.
I was just going to say, apart from the fact that it is very individualistic, what would you say are some of the most common ones that you'll come across?
That was my question.
Yeah, so there's definitely ones. I mean, some of the probably more common ones that, from a nutrition standpoint, would be kind of the big ones, like dairy products. Again, a lot of people just don't handle well. So we'll look at potentially dairy. We'll look at if it's specifically again nutrition oriented. It may be again grains and wheat and gluten based products as well. Those can certainly be irritants to the GI tract. So we'll take a look at those and do a trial elimination for 30 days and kind of reintroduce with a gluten challenge and see how that kind of comes out. So those are two specific things. And really, like I said, the stress is certainly a huge one, because like IBS or any of those kind of inflammatory bowel disorders, stress is a big component. So we'll try to implement stress management or stress reduction techniques while at the same time, and we kind of do it one thing at a time so we can sort of pinpoint what the cause is. But those are some specifics that we'll kind of look at initially.
So we're talking about some commonalities here. You mentioned, talking to clients and people on Facebook and so forth. What are some of the more common symptoms that you're getting with people across, from clients to people on Facebook or email or people you converse with.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting part is that most people kind of brush off symptoms, and that's why when we get into conversations from a client perspective, they might not even assess that anything is wrong. They just sort of say, "Oh, this is kind of normal for me. It's par for the course." And for them, it's because it's so common. Oh, I've got a friend who's got the same thing, and oh, my mom's got the same thing going on. So it's just part of life, and really any kind of digestive dysfunction. Of course, periodically we're all going to get a bug or something like that, but I'm talking about something that's a regular, consistent issue. And some of the biggest things that come up are going to be things like loose stools or diarrhea, certainly part of it. Or on the other end of it, constipation. So only going maybe a couple days a week, or really finding it hard to pass. So those things certainly come up. Just general indigestion is always a big one. So those 2 or 3 are probably the top ones. Heartburn, kind of GERD symptoms already are kind of wrapped into that as well. And if it hasn't been specifically kind of diagnosed, they're probably self-medicating a lot of the time. So they're popping Tums or maybe Imodium or something, and just thinking, oh, this is sort of normal because it's common. But I would always argue, or at least kind of try to enlighten people that common doesn't mean normal. That really any kind of dysfunction, any kind of symptoms or responses that you're having really are signals from your body that something's awry, that something's kind of off kilter, and to really kind of look at that more closely.
So when the digestive system is out of whack, right? Somebody's coming to you and they're having all these issues. We know, because we're in the health field, that our body is like it's a big domino effect, right? So if one thing goes out of whack, it's going to affect everything else. So can you talk a little bit about if people are not digesting properly, if they're having all these IBS issues, how else is that affecting their body and their lifestyle?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing is probably just from an energy perspective, they're just not great energy because, again, if you're not absorbing nutrients, just even from a basic caloric perspective, that's part of it, but also that you're going to have maybe some nutrient deficiencies. If you're not digesting fats well, you're not going to be getting a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins. That certainly is going to affect, health and sort of metabolism, metabolic rate. That all sort of factors in. So any of those nutrient deficiencies could certainly be, and that usually kind of manifests as energy, energy issues. And then of course the energy issues can lead to performance. If we're talking about folks that are trying to be more physically active or getting to the gym, then that's going to tend to suffer as well. Those are more sort of immediate, maybe short-term things. More long-term might be like you said, Eric, so the domino effect of potentially autoimmunity. If we're talking a little bit deeper, if it's more chronic in nature, if we're talking about something like a intestinal permeability or leaky gut, that can trigger some autoimmune response. And I mean, you can list a whole host of autoimmune conditions that can relate to that. So that's a little trickier to determine, but it certainly can be something to consider. And that's, again, something that most folks probably aren't thinking about. So, oh, my stomach bothers me, and that's all it's going to be, and that's kind of the end of it. Not realizing that it may affect things like joints, because if there's an autoimmune reaction, and we're talking about the joints being affected, or if it's the thyroid, or any other particular glands that are going to be affected by autoimmune conditions and autoimmune responses, then that's a big issue, and that's something that definitely would need to be addressed. And really the first place to look would be the digestive tract, and then kind of work your way down.
I think it's interesting that people don't make the connection when someone's like having indigestion. If you look at the word itself, indigestion, it means you are not digesting properly. Right. So I think it's almost funny that people would be like, oh, it's just indigestion. But when you look at what that means, it means they're not absorbing, the minerals and the vitamins and the macronutrients the way they should. And that even just by nature, that word alone makes it sound like quite a problem that needs to be addressed more.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking about that very specific point today, just kind of in preparation, thinking about today's show. I was thinking, yeah, I mean, that just like you said, that very root word there, I mean, in and of itself kind of describes it right out there for you. So I think it comes back to people just looking at around them and saying, oh, this is kind of, this is sort of a normal, kind of a common thing. A lot of people have it, but yeah, I think you're right. You have to really look at what that really means, and what those domino effects can lead to down the line. But and that's the trick, is that in the way that a lot of a lot of folks are in terms of our sort of culture. It's the immediacy. Okay, well, if it's not going to bother me now, but they're not thinking, long term down the road. What are kind of the more chronic issues then that can kind of come from that too? So, yeah, definitely things to consider.
So, Jason, what are you mentioned? I guess it's not normal to have these issues. So, what would a normal digestive digestion look like, or how would it feel if somebody's looking out for the normalcy? What would they be looking for?
Yeah, so it would be, and everybody's a little bit different. If we get to the end phase, we're talking about poop, which I know we're covering today. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. But digestion should basically be that from the time you consume the food to the time it exits your body. Which again, there's a so we could talk about transit time. Transit time is the time from consumption of a food through the process of digestion, and that can take anywhere from, and again, it sort of varies, but anywhere from roughly 16 to 36 hours, somewhere in that window of time, depending on the composition of the meal that you eat. Fats and proteins take longer to digest and break down, so they'll take a little bit longer to move through. Fiber can certainly kind of affect that as well. So transit time would be one thing, and we touched last time on the idea of, well, how do you know? How do you know whether or not well, I ate A, and how do I know when it comes out? So the only way you can do some simple tests for transit time. One of the more kind of common, really simple, kind of popular ones is a beet test, where you eat a serving of beets because they have that sort of dark maroon kind of red pigment, and when you see your stool reflect as having sort of that dark maroon pigment in it, then that's an indication of your time frame. So check the time when you ate it until the time that you pass, and take a look at that. So this is something we should probably shout out now. Definitely look at your poop. Don't be afraid to look at your poop, everybody, because it's really sending, again, an indication of your overall health, digestive health being a big part of it. So number one, the transit time is a big part of it. You should generally be able to eat and digesting and not have the kind of the symptoms we're talking about. We shouldn't eat something and have, heartburn or indigestion, as John mentioned, or have anything of that nature as well, bloating or any of these kind of other symptoms that we would associate with that. So it should kind of move through your system within that time frame that we just mentioned. It should pass easily. Again, it should, from the course of, as far as, if we want to get into things like texture and we talk about poop consistency now, then it should be, essentially solid but not too hard. We're talking loose stool with sort of the watery diarrhea, which obviously is an issue, or constipation, which is the harder stool to pass. So it should be somewhere in between. Again, everybody will be a little different. You should pass probably at least once a day. It should be kind of somewhat reflective of your eating, but at least once a day. Again, when I talk to clients and I hear, oh well, yeah, I go maybe 2 or 3 times a week, it's like big red flag. Like something definitely is not, is not right there. So that's definitely part of it as well. When you get to that point where you're looking at a stool, you really shouldn't see a whole lot of undigested particles in the food. Again, that's going to be an indication that your body's kicking something out. It didn't break it down properly. Maybe there's a food intolerance or sensitivity there. So it should be basically your sort of moderate brown, kind of earthy tone, earthy smell or odor to it as well. So all those things are going to be really sort of tools basically for you to use to figure out exactly how your digestion goes. That's why we talk about poop so much, is how do you gauge digestion? First, it's kind of based off of how you feel when you eat, but then it's what's the end result of that. The energy that you get from your food, how well, again, we just talked about digesting and metabolizing, and then kind of the end product, the waste products that come out. What do they tell you about the way that you've just kind of worked that food through the system and eliminated the waste itself?
So let's keep on this theme of poop, and let's talk some more specifics. So someone comes to you, they have like chronic diarrhea, very loose stool, watery stool. What's the first thing you're thinking? What kind of protocol? What kind of issues is that person dealing with, and what can they do about it?
Right. Yeah. So we want to look at a number of things too. We want to see exactly again, I always go back, and it probably sounds funny because people would think, well, oh, you're talking about food, nutrition, but I would look at stress first. I mean, really, that's a big part of it. I mean, if it's watery stool, I mean, basically it's some indication that that your gut's kind of getting something out. It's an irritant. It's trying to eliminate from your body, whether it's processed foods or other toxins. Your body's trying to purge it. It draws water into the colon, and it kind of trying to expedites the process to get it out of your system. So it could be food toxins. It could be irritants. So we're going to look at the diet real specifically, see if there's anything that could be causative in that way. And the only way you can really tell, again, is through that sort of elimination process, elimination diet. And I just have people keep basically like a food journal, keep like a part of my food journals when I work with clients is not only what they eat, when they eat, but it's how they feel an hour after, how they feel 2 hours after, and how the poop is later that day. I mean, how did you eliminate that day? So if we can go and then tie that back, if we can say, oh well, here's a day where I really had an issue and I had diarrhea, and later in the day, let's look back to the meals earlier that day. What could be? It's a little bit of detective work. So let's see what could be the culprit here. What's the cause and effect going on? But again, back to sort of a non-food specific, it would be stress, because stress activates some of that sympathetic nervous system, and that's going to trigger some response. That's going to activate some of that nervous system in the gut, the enteric nervous system, and that can certainly cause issues as well. So looking at those two big things: how's your stress? What can we do to help mitigate stress in your life? And number two, food irritants of any kind. Let's kind of journal. Let's try to pinpoint what's going on there, and by trial and kind of elimination, figure out exactly what may be the causal factor.
If you're Eric, you do a visual journal and take pictures of it.
It's true.
Yeah.
And you touched on this a little bit before, Jason. The main reason I'm so adamant and so open about poop is because people are always so shy. And right. I feel like if I'm just out there playing and like showing pictures of it, people be like, okay, maybe it's not that big of a deal, Because like this whole thing is about. I see you shaking your head over there.
I don't want to see your poop. I hate.
He's gonna change his profile picture on Facebook.
I should totally do that. I should totally do it. Maybe I will.
Totally not do that. Not do that.
But the whole theme of this is about how what ends up in your toilet bowl is a prime indicator of how your overall health is. So I think when people get over the fact that I have to look at my poop, and what my poop looks like tells me if I'm in good health or not. I think people are so shy, and it's not really appropriate, but you gotta take care of your business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's a huge part of it. So I wrote I wrote a recent article and post on my website called Fecal Matters, and it was basically kind of breaking it down, like giving a bunch of detail as to what folks should be looking for in terms of consistency, regularity, any abnormalities, the period of time or transit time we just mentioned. So I call it my CRAP guidelines. So look at that, which includes things that we've already touched on, like color and transit time and consistency. And you're right, Eric. I mean, it points to health, and it's just an aspect of life. Everybody poops. It's a matter of fact. It's a matter of health. So it's something that everybody should consider. And now, whether or not you want to post pictures on Facebook, that's a different thing. But at least for your own purposes, kind of get sense, because there are some more significant things that that we haven't even touched on. I mean, we're talking about maybe some more subclinical things, but there's certainly clinical issues. I mean, if you have blood in your stool, then there's indications there that could be a much more serious condition. So, which requires physician. So those types of things are. While we kind of, it's lighthearted and we kind of joke about it, if somebody isn't looking, they're not going to really know. I mean, and if you don't know, you can't really, kind of treat something, and it could get to a point where it's beyond, beyond intervention. Hopefully not, but that's, certainly a good reason to kind of take a look in the bowl. So.
Great. So, a question from someone on my Facebook page, and we're, mostly paleo primal on my page. Someone had asked, how should or does someone whose digestion is ideal, if they eat a paleo diet, how does it look different than maybe someone who's on the more conventional diet? Is it the same amount of times per day? Should the look of the stool look the same? Is there differences between that when it's ideal?
It's going to come out like caveman dinosaur poop, just big clumps of nothing.
I don't know what they're expecting, but
it should pretty right. Pooping bricks. No, I mean, it really should. It should be the same. I think we touched on this. We had this discussion a little bit last time too. Is that the one thing I would, and not that it certainly is designed to be this way, but we talked about fiber content, and for somebody that's primal or paleo, and they're avoiding some of the more kind of traditionally like high fiber based foods like grains and legumes. Although we know what some of the negative aspects of those foods are as well, that they are high fiber. So if you eliminate those, you eliminate sort of a couple categories of foods that are high fiber. Fiber is important for bulk of the stool to kind of move it through the system as well. So as long as they are kind of filling the gaps in with paleo-based vegetable sources, maybe some fruit and nut sources of fiber, that would be the only thing I would say to maybe a consideration. As far as consistency, frequency, all that, it should really be the same. It should be just as healthy, hopefully healthier, because they've eliminated a lot of those processed and junk foods that are going to be the ones that are more irritating and more problematic.
Which on that topic, you mentioned earlier in the episode that you'll remove people off gluten, give them 30 days, and maybe put it back in and see how that affects them. How often would you say when they try putting that back in that it affects people negatively? And how often does it not? What do you see going on with gluten?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more problematic foods that I see, and that's why I try to work with clients to remove that. I definitely see some issues, and the funny thing is, not funny really, but the interesting part is that it affects people in different ways. So, and this goes back to the idea, the thought that that gluten just, you're going to have specifically digestive symptoms from it, and that's not the case. I've had clients that have certainly had digestive issues that clear up and maybe come back, but I've also had clients who had really no major digestive issues, but they eliminated gluten and other things kind of cleared up, and then those other things kind of came back to them. So I'll share a story of a specific client, and just as a good example of this case where a client that I've been working with for a while, we're doing personal training, nutrition, counseling, and exercise, and just as sort of on a whim, I mean, she wasn't really complaining of any specific digestive issues or anything. I said, hey, how about we try a gluten challenge? She had kind of progressed through different levels, and she was getting healthier and healthier. So I suggested, and she had some questions because she had read some stuff in sort of popular media about gluten. I said, well, let's give it a shot. Let's have you do a gluten-free challenge for 30 days, reintroduce it. So about 2.5 weeks in of being very staunch, I know this is one of those clients that's very compliant, so she followed things to a T, didn't touch gluten, stayed away from it completely. She was in for a personal training and exercise session and said, well, this joint pain in my knees, this arthritis pain that I have, it feels like it's almost gone. Could that be the gluten? And she, almost kind of surprised by that. And I said, it's possible. Let's see. So that continued for the next couple of weeks, and so this, she did drop some weight in that time frame. That certainly wasn't the goal. I wouldn't necessarily, tell folks that getting rid of gluten is a weight loss solution, although it certainly can have that effect for a number of reasons. But she did lose some weight. Some headaches that she had that were periodic seemed to kind of dissipate and go away. The joint pain dissipated and was much less significant, almost gone. She reintroduced the gluten after 30 days, and immediately, the joint pain came back within a day. She was nauseous after eating it. She went to a friend's house for a dinner, and the woman made lasagna. She hadn't eaten gluten in 30 days, and she has this big pasta lasagna dinner. And she said afterwards, she told her husband, "You got to take me home. I got to go lay down." She felt that bad from it, and it wasn't. You could say, "Oh, what could have been other things?" But every time that she would kind of reintroduce it, either accidentally or maybe, "Oh, let me just test this out," the same exact thing happened. She would have these very similar symptoms come back. So the joint issues, when we talked about the autoimmune response and some of those other things are certainly the case. So she was sold. I mean, she didn't have to have labs done. I mean, that's she didn't go through that process. Just from sort of anecdotal, her own personal experience, she was convinced that she was gluten sensitive and eliminated it from her diet. And interestingly enough, about 6 months later, her daughter was diagnosed with celiac disease. So there's definitely, at least it was sort of, again, another sort of proof positive that there's, at least for them, some component of genetic predisposition for them, and it's kind of full-fledged. Her daughter got to the point where it did that much damage that she was able, through the biopsy, to be diagnosed with celiac, whereas her mom, she never got that test done, but she knew from her own experience, the elimination diet, that it was problematic for her.
So sometimes people don't know, how good they could feel, until they try. Someone might feel fine. They might not notice they have any symptoms, but it would almost be worth encouraging everybody to try it because you could be better off perhaps.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I think I talk to clients about that often. You don't know how bad you feel until you feel good, and then you kind of eliminate that, and you can feel the difference. Oh my God, I can't believe it. These things that I again just thought were sort of, old age is kind of creeping up on me, sort of things. No, there could be some specific, and there probably most of the time there is. I mean, I've never sort of liked that sort of you're just getting older sort of kind of a cliche statement, but I think there's going to be back to that sort of what's the root cause, what's the effect here, and I think it's always worth the try. I mean, it's a relatively simple thing to do. There's more options day by day to kind of stay, if we're talking about gluten specifically, to be gluten-free, and a lot of resources for that. So I think it's definitely for anybody worth a trial period at least.
Great.
So sticking with the this theme of gluten-free or paleo, primal, and poop, one of the things that I happen to see a lot of, which seems really common, is when people switch to more of a paleo, primal diet, a lot of people for some reason seem to get constipated. Do you guys notice that, Jason? Do you see that being somewhat common? And if so, what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen that a lot specifically, but I have heard that from other practitioners and from other people that have done it. The only thing I could say could be a couple things. It could certainly be, as we mentioned, is that lack of fiber, maybe lack of bulk, and I think that's where if somebody is first getting into a paleo primal approach to nutrition, they just have to be really cognizant of that. Is that they're going to eliminate those couple food groups which they probably ate on a regular basis, and they just really have to kind of fill in those holes with some high fiber foods. That's kind of the trick, beans or legumes, for example, like black beans. A couple black beans, like 14 grams of fiber. It's about half your daily amount of fiber, recommended amount of fiber a day. Well, if you eliminate that category, then you're relying really on a lot of those vegetable sources, fruit sources. A lot of, again, depending on kind of which kind of spectrum of paleo is somebody doing, like very little fruit, kind of very low carbohydrate based, that could be it. I mean, so you just have to really kind of take a look at that and be really, really kind of plan well and be really smart about going about how they approach sort of covering the whole in terms of fiber intake.
I have heard the opposite too, Joe. I've several times I've had people tell me, yeah, I switched to paleo, but the only thing is, I'm shitting all day long now, and I think that, again, it might depend on what kind of diet they were eating before that,
Right.
What they switched to, and maybe this person, who says they're going all the time now, maybe they were never going, maybe they were going once a day or not even, and now they're going 2 or 3 times, and to them that's shitting all day long, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting one, Eric. What do you, what's your experience with that?
I noticed with me personally,
Of course, you're going to talk about your own personal poop.
when I switched over to eating a cleaner diet, or you want to call it paleo or primal, whatever, I used to have really bad gas, and almost within a week or two, it diminished. It was like non-existent, and I think I owe it a lot to some of definitely the foods that I was eating before. So for me personally, and the people that I have coached and in my own family, the moment, especially gluten is taken out and all the wheat products are taken out, my digestive system improved 100%. And
I bet Austin was happy about that.
Oh my goodness, yeah. He used to call my fart Satan's breath. That was like the cute nickname. Yeah, it wasn't happening. But if I do like fart, or if I don't go to the bathroom, which rarely happens, and if I look in the toilet and I don't like what I see, like I flip my shit, like literally. I'm like, okay, something's up, and I get really paranoid. I usually don't get too paranoid over things, but if my poop isn't looking good, I get really upset, and I get like, okay, so the world is ending, I'm dying.
Eric, you're adding stress to the situation, which is good.
I know. It's a double-edged sword. I don't know what I'm doing with myself.
Well, one other thing I will say, just in terms of that piece, John, of somebody who is going all the time, or maybe has some issues when they switch over, is just like Eric said, looking at where they came from. If they were somebody that was on a relatively low-fat or really low-fat diet, they were doing the low-fat diet thing, trying to be healthy, and then they came across paleo and switched over, and now they've increased their fat intake significantly because obviously their carbohydrate intake as far as macronutrients is probably a little bit lower, but their fat intake has probably gone up a good bit. It may be an issue with fat digestion, and just that switch over, kind of getting to a point where they can better digest fat, could be something that's helpful. So for anybody that kind of comes into a situation where they feel like they're having sort of, more frequent stools or fatty stools, or once they've switched over to paleo, sort of primal approach, is to look at that and support, fat digestion. You could do that in a couple ways. Probably the easiest way is with, probably again, sort of temporary supplement. To some degree, your body's just going to have to get used to it, and it'll just kind of slowly. I would, again, sort of introduce things more slowly. But certainly certain supplements that can support kind of gallbladder function and digestion can be helpful there too.
Now let's. Oh, sorry. You can go on if you want, Eric.
No, go ahead, John. I'll come back.
Okay. So we're so civil here, Let's get a little more personal perspective from you, Jason. What in general is your diet like? How would you describe that? And what's your digestive health like? As the expert, how are you living it? How do you find it affects you? And just are there other methods that you use for your own health as well? Different types of therapies or training. Just where are you at right now?
Yeah, if you want to share pictures of your poop, just forward them to Eric. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to take a look.
I will analyze them and then show them on my Facebook page.
Perfect. I've got them. Let me just load them up here. I've got them all saved under a folder, poop folder 101 now. No, that's a good question. And so I'll kind of backtrack a little bit, because part of the process, and I think this is for anybody that is making changes in terms of their health, or they're trying something new, and it's always a bit of a journey, and you learn as you go along. You learn new things, you learn new techniques, and education changes, and research changes, and science kind of updates, and so that all kind of comes into play. But for me personally, when I completed the functional diagnostic nutrition program, part of the process for us is to actually go through and complete the functional lab kits, and one of those lab kits looks specifically at digestion. It looks at mucosal barrier and integrity, so the mucosal lining of the intestines, where's the integrity and strength of that? Is there any reactivity there from an immune perspective? And if there is, that's an indication of something going on. So I had some feedback from my labs that was, showed that there was, maybe some stuff going on there, and so I did some additional further testing. And I would have considered, there it is, there's testing, and I would have considered that, for the most part, I thought, I'm okay, my digestion's pretty good, yeah, I've got the occasional whatever. I was kind of, at least to some degree, probably in the camp that said, well, I probably ate something funny, and that's what that was. But come to find out through that series of testing, and doing some additional testing, got to the point where I did the stool pathogen test, which, if you talk about looking at your poop, this is actually pooping and then scooping it into a vial to mail off so they can analyze it. So it's really kind of getting your hands dirty, no pun intended. But I came back and I had a parasite infection. So I had Cryptosporidium parvum, parasite infection. And again, this is me, personal trainer, healthy guy, and I was healthy for the most part. But there's always the potential that there's something underlying, regardless of how healthy you are. And that's why I try to preach to everybody is you could be, paleo, and you could be CrossFit, and you could be super healthy, and all that stuff's awesome, but there's always a chance that something else could be going on, and you have to kind of dig deep to find that out. So I eliminated the parasite, kind of took through a whole process of kind of building my gut health back up, used some series of supplements. I was already eating I was eating a real food diet, pretty much paleo. I still eat essentially sort of a paleo-ish or paleo template in terms of nutrition. Eliminate some of the things like gluten, avoid those. But that process of that, and introducing things like bone broth and some other things that are really healing to the gut, went out, got myself a slow cooker, and make my bone broth every week now. So those types of things I introduced, and since then it's been significantly better. Where again, it wasn't bad to begin with, I didn't think, but obviously there was something there. There was a parasite, and out of the clients that I've tested, when we get into these functional lab tests, And I'd say about 80% of them so far have had some sort of parasitic infection. Most of them have been sort of symptomatic. They've had something going on, but some haven't been, or at least they weren't 100% honest with me at first. It's like, oh, yeah, I didn't tell you. I kind of have this thing where I kind of, have a loose stool 3 times a week. Oh, okay, I didn't, you said you're okay at first. And so it's kind of digging deeper with those questions. But so that's where I'm at now. Kind of went through the process, eat paleo template style, exercise pretty regularly, try to work with, always kind of challenged with anybody else. I think we all probably would admit this, and none of us are perfect, so implementing good stress, management techniques and sleep and all that good stuff, especially with busy lifestyles, is important, but you have to just prioritize it. So that's what I tend to do. I always do some form of, I said nutrition that is going to be sort of gut, beneficial. So probiotic, fermented foods, the bone broth that I just mentioned are kind of staples within my nutritional plan now.
Great. You mentioned you get a really high rate of people that come back with positive results for some sort of parasite. And I've noticed that too. How do people get people get parasites? Is it food or water, or is it from eating poo or taking pictures of it?
What kind of fetish are you into, Joe?
It's so common. That's a different show, totally different show. Yeah. I'm not even sure where I'm going with that.
I think you can get it in a number of ways. I think the misconception is that you have to be, in a foreign country and you have to drink the water, and Montezuma's Revenge is what, kind of comes to mind. But that's not necessarily the case. I mean, parasites are all around us. They certainly could be in any type of drink of water. They can be on food. You can get them through fecal oral transplant, as far as like you go to a restaurant and, maybe the cook didn't wash his hands so great. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways that can happen. But the key is, and that makes it sound sort of like daunting, like, oh my God, there's no way I can avoid these things. And the key is not that you're not going to encounter those, is how strong and how what's the integrity really of your gut to begin with that can protect you from those pathogens. I mean, you're bound to come across them. You're bound to come across yeast and fungus and bacteria. That kind of stuff's all around us and really part of us. And there's different theories on how much of it's beneficial, which strains are going to be helpful to us, and there's the symbiotic versus ones that maybe are more problematic. But you just have to, the first place to start is optimizing your own personal health and optimizing the strength and integrity of your own digestive tract.
So similar to how the immune system, we encounter germs and viruses all the time, and how it takes care of it. So you're essentially you have to make your body where parasites can't basically, breed in it, right? Your body becomes uninhabitable to parasites is what you need.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's going to be probably some degree that certain, there's some new research and some new thoughts about like that there are certain parasites that might be beneficial, but again, that's sort of burgeoning information that's coming out now. And but what I've seen so far is that there's certainly ones specifically that we know are going to be an issue and that are going to cause sort of maybe more acute symptoms as well as over the long haul more chronic symptoms that kind of wear and tear at the body. So so you just have to kind of build up your own resilience to that and kind of be strong and healthy from that perspective.
Jason, if we can go back to we spoke about it earlier about actually the consistency of your poop. If you can talk about what does it mean if what is it actually doing to the body if you're constipated? Like if you have poo sitting up in there for like a week, what is that actually doing to your body? And on the flip side of that, if you're like spraying poop out of your butt like for diarrhea, what does that mean also?
Yeah. So if you're constipated, I mean, essentially, there's this specific transit time we talked about. It's supposed to exit the body, and it's a waste product. And so, the majority of what comes out in terms of stool is tons of bacteria. Maybe a little bit of kind of food that can't quite digest in terms of certain fibers. Some different hormones are certainly eliminated in stool. Red blood cells that have died off. So what gives poop its brown color is bilirubin, the red pigment of red blood cells, and that kind of is all in the mix there. So these are essentially a lot of waste products, and if you're constipated, they're staying in your system. And that's a problem. Is your body reabsorbing particular hormones that it's trying to eliminate? So for a lot of people that have maybe, again, maybe if it's men that have higher estrogen levels than is appropriate, estrogen may recirculate because it's not being eliminated properly. So and again, that can kind of cause a whole cascade of issues, which might be a whole other podcast. But so that could be the case. And then if it's going through too quickly from that sort of diarrhea perspective or that end of it, then again, it probably just means you're not absorbing the nutrients well, that it's actually your system's kind of flushing it through too quickly and you're not absorbing what you should. So both ends of the coin are not great. I mean, that's why we're going to kind of find that happy medium where it's neither or.
I actually just made a video on that exact thing you just said about reabsorbing estrogen and other hormones. So let's talk about some common thoughts. Maybe they're misconceptions, but some common theories that are out there. I can think of a couple. Maybe you guys can throw some in too. So the one I'm thinking of is that meat is harder to digest and it stays in our gut for months and goes rancid and makes us sick. Is there any truth to that, or what's going on there?
No, I mean there's no truth to that. I'm not even sure where. From a physiological perspective, it doesn't make sense. So I'm not sure where some of that, those thoughts or those kind of myths or misconceptions come from. Your body will, take meat, break it down to its constituent parts, from proteins to peptides to amino acids, and utilize them in the body in one form or another. And what it doesn't need, it's going to eliminate. So again, unless you've got faulty digestion, that could maybe slow the process and keep it in your system longer than you'd want. But if your digestion is healthy, then there's no reason that should be the case.
Now, what do you know? What do you see in terms of digestion? The impact that eating, grass-fed organic beef or factory farm, hormone antibiotic pumped up beef. We know that there's a huge difference in the effect it has on the body. Is there a direct effect on the digestive system?
I mean, I haven't seen anything specifically with clients per se. I would say that usually when somebody starts to switch over and eat healthier, kind of across the board, as Eric indicated, like with himself as an example, that digestion for most people will improve. I haven't been able to kind of pinpoint specifically with clients the difference between maybe factory farm versus grass-fed, but there certainly seems to be indications that it would be healthier overall, and if it's healthier overall for the body, then it's going to generally be healthier for the digestive system. So, but that would be an interesting kind of trial to kind of look at that like real specifically.
Right.
Jason, the other day I was getting some hate on one of my YouTube videos because I mentioned about eating foods that we were meant to eat. So staying away from processed foods and chemicalized foods, and also I was mentioning in this video that we actually become what we eat. Our foods are broken down to the smallest particles, and they eventually become our cells and our blood and things like that. And people, I don't think they believed that. I think they thought that I was making it up, that it was just, I was just pulling it out of the thin air. So if you can talk about that a little bit, about actually foods that our bodies are not supposed to be eating and what that might do, and how foods are actually broken down and assimilated and become our organs and our cells and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll start with the second part first, which is the concept of the fact that that we are what we eat, which is very true. I mean, it sounds cliche and it kind of sounds funny. Oh, you mean if I eat this apple, then all of a sudden my shoulder becomes an apple? It's like, no, that's not what we mean.
Yeah,
we mean
one
that
of the wise guys was like, oh, Eric, so I just ate some French fries, so now my fingers are going to become French fries? No, you asshole. That's not what I meant.
Eric, do you even lift?
What'd you say?
Eric, do you even lift?
Yeah, exactly.
That was common. I just watched that. It's like, Eric, do you even lift?
They're so stupid. I mean, I don't want to get all angry here, yeah. But it was basically a bunch of guys who were probably bodybuilder types, and I don't know. I think there's a new type of eating called if it fits your macros. I don't know anything about it, but I'm thinking just by the name is you eat foods, and as long as it fits your daily macronutrient allowance, you can eat it, even if it's shitty food. I have no idea what it's about. But a bunch of those guys who were following the if it fits your macros philosophy, they came to my page and like, okay, this dude doesn't know what he talks about. But hello, I have several degrees that tell me I do know what I'm talking about, bud.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bro science. They're well versed in bro science.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever.
Yeah, I mean, from the science of it, the scientific perspective is we've got essentially the three macronutrients: proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. As we eat those, we digest them, we break those down, we break them down into their kind of smaller parts. But those smaller parts have specific roles in the body. They go through the digestive system to get absorbed and carry out a number of different functions. All depends on what the macronutrient is, and again, probably maybe more than we want to get into now. But yeah, I mean, there's truth to that. It's going to go through the liver. It's going to be delivered into areas of the body that need it, whether it's for specific organ function, whether it's for gland function, metabolic processes. Proteins are hugely important because they essentially wind up being the building blocks once you break them down to amino acids for things like enzymes and hormones as well. Fats certainly kind of help, kind of build up the integrity of the cellular membranes because the cells have phospholipid membranes, phospholipid, lipid fat. So there's the fat, the fatty membrane of it too. So from a really cellular perspective, you're right on. I mean, that's exactly what happens in the body. What was the second part of your question, Eric? I'm sorry, you had the part about the food and then what we're kind of meant to eat, or?
Yeah, so I was talking to a bunch of 11-year-old dancers. You have to think of that as well, and I was speaking in terms that they would understand. So that's why when I said I couldn't go all scientific on them.
Right.
But also I was going between foods that our bodies were meant to eat, way back in the day, and foods that are current now that are brand new in the last 50 to 100 years. A lot of chemicalized foods and things like that.
Yeah, there's some of those novel foods. Actually, I watched the beginning of your video clip too, and I thought that was great when you had that list of the ingredients, of foods. And I think that's sort of common sense. I mean, for folks, I think the challenge that we face as health practitioners is, people will go into a grocery store, they see it on the shelf, they assume, hey, it's edible, so I can eat it, and it must be fine to eat, and that's not necessarily the case. That we've kind of nutritional science has whittled things down to its, these individual components or add different chemicals, preservatives, additives, which there's plenty of good science that shows actually that those can have certain effects. A lot of the certain additives and colors specifically have been shown in particular studies to cause some ADD response because of some neurological dysfunction that it causes in the body. So there's certainly those things. Probably the most common one that comes to mind is high fructose corn syrup and how that's sort of a processed version and how that's been linked now to the amount of fructose our bodies can sort of handle and dispose of and how that affects metabolism and certainly the chain reaction with weight and obesity and things of that nature. So I mean, from a very common sense standpoint, it makes sense, and from a scientific standpoint, there's plenty of evidence that that's the case, and that's why I think that when we talk about things like the paleo or primal, and a lot of people get this sort of certain connotation, oh, you're telling me I got to eat like a caveman or whatever, is they have to kind of look beyond those sort of those confines or those definitions to look at really what that specific eating the nutritional plan is all about, which is eating real foods that are close to nature, eliminating a lot of the foods that are relatively novel that have come in only in the past couple hundred years or so, or maybe the past 1,000 years, that we're not genetically kind of programmed for really well. And I think if people looked at it from that perspective, they'd say, oh, okay, this makes sense. I'm eating food that's real, it's from nature, it's not in the back of a label with 20 ingredients that I can't even pronounce half of them. So I think you're spot on with that.
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure that like 60% of my body is made out of butter and cream.
Through that.
And the other 40% bacon, maybe a little bit of
little steak and eggs, But that's what I love too, is when I eat my butter and my heavy cream, which is all the time, is like the ingredient on butter is butter, and the ingredient on my cream is cream. So it's been working out. I'm on the butter cream diet.
Nice, and look at those guns.
By the way, John, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a little left out. I didn't get the memo that we were supposed to wear black sleeveless T-shirts today.
This is my legendary fitness V-neck tee.
Eric and Jason are looking like twins over there.
We totally planned this. It's the new uniform for A Tribe Called Health. This is what you got to wear every show.
I'll keep that in mind. I better start doing dips and curls. Because that's all I really do anyway. I mean, basic.
The show beach muscles.
Exactly.
I practically don't even work out, you know. Hey, when people ask me what I do, I just balance and just crawl and jump, and you know, I help my clients with things. I lift a weight here or there, you know, like a couple times a week. Make sure I sleep, and clients are always like, "What are you doing? You know, what are you doing? You're in here 2 hours a day, 5 days a week." I'm like, "No, man, just relax." And they even want to book in. They're like, "Okay, so I'm thinking I should come in and see you 4 days a week, you know, back to back." And I'm like, "Oh, chill, you know." It's not that hard.
Yeah.
Not that hard.
Less is more. Less is more. So another common theme that I hear a lot is we need a ton of fiber. We have to eat our oatmeal, eat our insoluble fiber. It'll sweep out our digestive system. So how much fiber do we really need? Do we need insoluble, soluble? What effect does that all have? What do we really need?
Right. Yeah. So I guess quick distinction between soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber is the fiber that attracts water, forms a gel, kind of slows digestion. It can help you feel full. It's all the things we would kind of attribute to fiber. Generally, insoluble fiber tends to add some of that bulk to the diet, but it kind of depends on where you're at. Again, it goes back to that: where's your health? Where's specifically your digestive health? Because soluble fiber is relatively kind of easy on the gut, whereas insoluble fiber will tend to be a little bit more abrasive on the gut, especially if you already have an inflamed gut, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. So if your gut health is in good shape, then you're good to go with probably getting good sources of fiber to kind of aid that bulking concept and that movement of stool and waste products through the digestive system. But if it's not, if you've got some sort of inflammatory bowel condition, then insoluble fiber is going to be maybe a little bit more irritating to the gut. So just a couple of quick examples, just things as far as insoluble fiber would be things like corn, peppers, celery, a lot of the cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbages. Some of the more the soluble forms would be things like squashes, carrots, beets, plantains. So those are some of the different sources. Ideally, and this is something I kind of work with clients a good bit. Fiber is important. We want to kind of aim, and the general recommendation is 35 grams, roughly 35 grams a day. It's a little bit different. They give a distinction between male and female, but I would just say for everybody, kind of if you shoot for 35, you're doing good, because most people are going to fall far short of that. The majority of the clients that I have when we start, and we do some form of food journaling and kind of track and calculate fiber intake. Inevitably, almost every client I work with falls somewhere between like 10 and 15 grams a day. It certainly should be more than that. So if you can find ways to get it up higher towards that, 30, 35 grams a day intake, that would be great. So those are things to kind of consider with fiber. And like we said, it's just a matter of where you get those dietary sources from.
Now, what do you see happening with people with a lot of nuts and seeds? Because coming from a paleo perspective here, one of the things a lot of people jump into is making all kinds of things out of almond flour or loading things full of flax, things like that. What do you generally see going on with nuts and seeds when people are getting too much or too little? Does everybody have the same reactions to them?
Not too much. I don't see the same reactions necessarily, but probably some of the more common reactions would be kind of what we went back to earlier, which is is fat intake. I mean, if you're introducing a lot more flax and a lot more almond and coconut fat, those types of things, they're going to be higher fat content. It's just, are you digesting those fats well? So that's for the most part, are you breaking that down well? But I don't see any big issues kind of across the board with nuts and seeds.
Great.
Do we have any other questions from Facebook, Twitter, or email, anything like that?
No. I was able to ask one of mine.
Yeah, same. I'm good. I'm out.
All right. So I mean, I think we covered a lot of territory here, and I mean, we can definitely have you back, Jason, and maybe drill down a little bit deeper on a specific topic. I would love to get into, more specifics on, the microbiota in the gut, because there's a lot of nuance there and a lot of specifics there that, I think we could probably easily do a whole show on, if not more. But I think we covered a lot of ground here. It's a good primer on digestion, so I think we can start wrapping up on that.
Let's let people digest this, right?
And next time, seriously, you guys got to let us know, if there's
we'll get some more, right? We'll get some more.
What's that?
Yeah, well then we'll bring it back and we'll do some more. We'll dig a little deeper into the shit.
Yes. And if there's a dress code, please let us know, man. I'm feeling left out. I'm about to rip the sleeves off my shirt.
That would be great. That would be great. It's definitely it's a really complex system, and there's a lot of things going on. We scratched the surface, but got some good information out. But yeah, I mean, there's tons of different ways we can look at things. Microbiota is great. I mean, I'm sort of fascinated by that and research and look at that stuff all the time. Looking at how people can. We talked about some ways sort of that people can improve their digestion, but again, it's somewhat individualized. But if, for example, some of the Facebook and Twitter fans come up with specific things that they have going on, we can maybe give them a little bit more drilled down, ideas, at least places to start. It is, as I think Eric mentioned a good bit earlier, it is a domino effect in the body in terms of certain things in the digestive system trigger other things to respond, and then other things underneath that. So you kind of have to find where that weak link is and kind of start from the top and kind of work your way down to see where you might have the dysfunction that's causing issues kind of down the line. So if you look and your poop's not up to par, so to speak, and then it could be a number of things. I mean, and so you have to really kind of look back at where along the chain of my digestive system it is the weak link, and how can you kind of correct that, tweak it, work on it a little bit. But we gave some basics today. Certainly, eating more real food, managing stress are going to be a couple of things, and then. But yeah, you can certainly get more specific with a lot of this because there's a lot of stuff to consider.
If people want to work with you, where can they find you? How should they contact you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can find me at digestivedetective.com. They can find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Digestive Detective. Twitter handle at Digestive Detective, just without the I and the E on the end of both those words. So that's probably the best way. You can certainly shoot me an email. There's an email link through the website, or they can email me at jason@digestivedetective.com. Because I do work with clients, coaching clients, kind of broad health coaching perspective, but also, obviously if it's a digestive issue they have going on, then we can really work on that specifically.
Great, cool, and as always, you can find Barbara and myself at sexfoodandkettlebells.com, and
What's good? What's going on at your site, John? Any recipes and posts?
Yeah, lots of new recipes going up right now, and Barbara's really got into a lot of the posts she's wanted to do. We're about to talk about sleep is a big one. We're talking about the nervous system, getting more into training, and behavior change. Tons of cool stuff is going on, always something different. And I'll probably take a mini break soon because it's our 3-year anniversary tomorrow, and we're going to go.
Nice! Congratulations!
Congrats, man. Awesome.
Thank you. So, yeah. What about you, Eric? What's going on?
I'm putting together actually a report that's coming out soon. That's called Everyday Detox. So it's going to be teaching people just about how they can do little things every day to clean out their body and detox their body. So that's going to be coming out soon.
We'll have to do a whole episode on that.
What'd you say?
Yeah,
we'll have to do a whole episode on that.
Oh, totally. That'd be awesome.
And you've got another book out also, The Beginner's Guide to Holistic Nutrition?
Oh, the Simple Guide to Holistic Nutrition.
Where can people find that?
You can. I put a plug to it on each one of my YouTube videos. So if you go to YouTube and you type in Eric Holst Wellness, go through any of those videos, you can find it there. Or it's posted often on my Facebook page, on my website, which is erichulst.com. And I'm actually in the process of working with my brother on a project, so I'm really excited about that. That's going to come out. Yeah, I know, right? Brother action going on.
Nice. Yeah, cool.
So that's going to be coming out sometime in the beginning of the summer, and I'll talk a little bit more about that then.
Awesome. Cool. And so you could find me at wellnesspunks.com. My blog there is a little underwhelming because I post on my Facebook page a little bit more. I've got recipes and stuff, but my Facebook page is facebook.com/wellnesspunks. I update that quite frequently. And I have a book out called So, Planting the Seeds for Health, Well-Being, a Superhero Life, and you could find that right on my website, which is wellnesspunks.com. And I think we're good. Oh, I got to give a shout out. If if you guys noticed, I was the one that sort of muddled through the intro in the beginning of the last couple of episodes because we're down a tribe member. We lost Todd. He's just a little bit too busy with his he's got a life, folks. So he's unable to join us, but he'll stop in from time to time and hang out with us for sure. But I definitely just want to give a shout out to Todd because it's his birthday this week. So happy birthday to Todd.
We miss you, Todd.
We miss you, Todd.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's just not quite the same. Next week we'll try and convince him to stop in for a few minutes, and we'll sing happy birthday. Well, Eric could sing happy birthday because he's the only one. Okay. All right on, man. Oh, also, trycoldhealth.com in case you have questions or find us on Facebook. There you go. All right.
Thanks for stopping by.
Thanks again, Jason, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.